Dandavat pranams, love and respects all of our dear friends around the world. Today is a special day for us. Today is the anniversary of the day of disappearance, departure of Śrīla Bhakti Siddhānta, Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he is our great leader and our great guide in this modern age in the line of Krishna consciousness. He was a pioneer in his time. He was a spiritual revolutionary, spiritual visionary. He was someone who had that very deep insight, to see, to understand, and to apply how to practice and how to spread the message in this modern age, right? Generally, we are following the advice that we are given by the scriptures, by the saints. But those with very deep insight, deep intelligence, they can see, they understand what is the inner essence of these teachings and how it may be appropriate to adjust them, adjust the practice. Not that the teachings change, but how we apply them and how we practice them. That may change according to time, place, and circumstance. And so Śrīla Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he was a great soul of that category, who could, Śrīla Maharaj, he compared him to Napoleon Bonaparte, who was the great, the famous great French general, who had that type of vision in terms of the military, right? And Śrīla Maharaj, Dandavat Sulalita, happy to have you here, tuning in from Turkey. And Śrīla Maharaj, he tells of how he gives the example of how Napoleon, when he was first appointed as a general, the tide immediately began to turn in the midst of this war that was going on, the Austro-Hungarian War, because previously the French were losing. But then Napoleon, he had this brilliant strategy, rather than to attack the weaker part of the enemy first and work your way up to the stronger end, which was the general strategy. Napoleon adopted the opposite strategy, very bold and risky, but if you can carry it off, you'll win everything, right? So Napoleon's strategy was to attack the stronghold, to attack the strongest part of the enemy's army. And then from there, everything topples, right? And we hear that there was this conversation that took place. Many of you have heard Śrīla Maharaj tell this story. There was this conversation that took place between the king and generals on the other side. What happened? We were winning and all of a sudden we're losing. And we hear they reported to the king, oh, they've appointed this new general and he doesn't know how to fight properly. So this was the case with Śrīla Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. He had that type of vision to understand. Dandavat Tapanandini Didi, Mexico. Happy to have you here. So Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he was a person of that type of vision, right? Who could understand what is the real essence. Just like in the war, the point is to win, right? By whatever means. So similarly, here in the practice of Krishna consciousness, what is the goal? To make spiritual advancement, not to tick this box and tick that box and follow this ritual and follow that ritual and this procedure and so on. But the real goal is to make internal progress in a genuine way. And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur could see, if in order for that to happen, some adjustments have to be made, right? And so we hear that, it is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita and Śrīmad Bhagavatam, by the nature of the material energy and simply by the influence of time, the degrading influence of time and the material atmosphere, everything goes down, everything becomes polluted, everything becomes degraded, things become diminished, right? And so for that reason, there's the necessity for constant fresh revelation. Dandavad Chaitanya Mai Didi, joining from Italy. There's a famous verse in Bhagavad Gita, right? Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata bhutanama dharmasya tadatmanam shujamyaham, right? Krishna is saying again and again, whenever there's an arising of adharma, of irreligion, and a diminishing of proper religion, of goodness, of piety, then I appear at that time, right? And sometimes the Lord is coming himself, sometimes he's sending his friends, sending his agents, right? And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right, he appeared 1500s and in a very glorious, wonderful way, spread the movement of Harinam Sankirtan, spread the gift of Krishna Prema, divine love. But then gradually, in the following centuries, that brightness and that purity of his message began to diminish, right? And we hear for some time the 6 Goswamis, right? Rup, Sanatan, Jiva Goswami. Then there was also Narottam, Shyamananda Srinivas, and others in the following generations who were doing their best to uphold the dignity and the purity of what Mahaprabhu came to give. But simply because of the energy of the material environment, especially this age of Kali Yuga, that purity was lost, right? And I'm reminded actually of one comment Srila Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur made, that he said, he spoke about his guru, Srila Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, and he commented that as much as that the influence of the age of Kali will be diminished to the extent that the teachings of Bhakti Vinod are spread. Isn't that incredible? What a powerful statement. What a powerful statement. As much as the teachings of Bhakti Vinod, we can say the teachings of pure devotion, as much as they are spread in this world, by that vibration, so much so the dark influence of this age will be diminished, will be counteracted, you can say. Right. And so, sometimes people, they ask me questions like, what can we do to help the world in this dark age? And simply by going on with our own practice and our own distribution in our small way, and through our small attempts of trying to spread the truth, then we can diminish the darkness of this age. We can shine our little light, right? There's some power in that. We all have some capacity, however great or small it may be, right? And so anyhow, coming to the 1800s, right? Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, he went through, and we understand this to be divine Leela, the Bhaktivinoda's, divine play of the great souls. Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, he showed this transformation in coming to embrace the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of Srimad Bhagavatam as the concluding message of the scriptures, of the Vedas. And so Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, we consider him a parshad, right? An eternal associate of the Lord. But this was his play for the instruction of general people, right? He showed himself to come to arrive at the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after dabbling, exploring other conceptions also, to making some comparative analysis and coming to this conclusion, with the prema dharma, the religion of divine love that is given by Lord Chaitanya, this is the highest thing, right? And so Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur arrived at this, but then he looked around him and he saw, things were a mess, right? Yes, what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what Lord Chaitanya has given, his message of divine love, the movement of Harinam, Sankirtan, Kirtan movement, this is the highest. But how is it being represented now? Right? How is it being practiced now? How is the purity, the dignity of that message and that practice being upheld in this age? And he saw it was an embarrassing situation. Right? There were so many persons who were misrepresenting in numerous ways. Right? We hear of this one some type of religious scholar. He made an analysis and he identified 13 different groups who were supposedly followers of Lord Chaitanya, but actually misrepresenting in different ways. And some more innocent, some less innocent, some, as an example, some putting emphasis on the bloodline, right? Like the caste system and honoring those from higher birth, right? And even today, like for example, there's a lineage coming from Advaita Acharya. There's a lineage coming from Nityananda Prabhu. These are principal associates of Lord Chaitanya. And so persons are honoring the bloodline, right? And we can give some respect to that, of course, but ultimately spiritual substance is independent of any physical blood connection, right? So this was like on the more innocent, lower end of the spectrum. Then there were much more serious cases of deviant, followers, dark tantric practices, mixing in sexual tantric practices with the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? And everyone appreciated, everyone celebrated the glories of the holy name and Nam Kirtan. But the necessity of chanting with a clean heart, practicing with a sincere and pure heart, that was not understood, right? And so, there was this idea, like our Gurudev mentioned, people might have a ganja smoking party and chanting Hare Krishna, right? And thinking, oh, we will all be liberated, right? And so the conception of following clean, pure practices and the whole culture of Sharanagati, this is the key, actually. This is the missing key. Sharanagati, surrender, right? And so Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, he wrote this whole collection of songs, right, called Sharanagati, which is going into depth about the different moods of surrender, of Sharanagati. And so Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, he was situated in a very unique position of influence as a government magistrate under the British rule, right, which was very prestigious. And he was mixing with this very elite section amongst the upper class of Bengal. And so he used that position and influence and respect that he had to try to give attention, attract attention and give honor to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message. And he wrote over 100 books, written in a dozen languages, something like that, half a dozen at least. He gave public talks, he wrote poetry, he wrote books in different, and one of his qualities was that he could write in different tones in ways that would resonate with persons of all different social backgrounds, Western mind, Eastern mind, upper class, lower class, rich, poor, village mood, city mood, like this. If Bhaktivinoda, he was empowered, right? He had divine empowerment, and he had this, and it's all documented, right? This is all documented. We still have those texts today. This is our good fortune. So Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, and then he also, he brought the holy Dham, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, to light. And he did so much. We can't go into that today. We won't have enough time. But at a certain point, he realized he needed someone else, right? He was paving the way for the person who was really going to take this off and develop it into a full-fledged movement, right? Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, he was working within the existing structure of society, right? He was a government magistrate, he was a grihasta, he had a family. He was working within the structure of society. We can say he was preparing the ground. But he needed someone else. He needed a revolutionary. He needed someone to take this off, to realize it, right? Someone to realize it. And so he prayed to the Lord. He prayed to the Lord, please send one of your own. Send one of your own. And our Gurudev made a very nice comparison. I believe Srila Sridhar Maharaj also, between Vyasadeva and Shukadev Goswami, right? Vyasadeva, He is the great sage who compiled all the Vedas, organized them, and gave the concluding text of Srimad Bhagavatam. It was a monumental achievement. But finally, when he was, completing Srimad Bhagavatam, he had this realization that he needed someone else to give this to the world, for this to be spoken to the world. He realized, I'm limited in my position, but I need someone else. And that someone else was his own son, Shukadeva Goswami. And so then it was Shukadeva who actually spoke the message of Bhagavatam in this grand assembly, right? And so similarly, Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur was in the same position, where he also wrote modern scripture, we can say, like Veda Vyasa, and he also revived ancient scripture, right? He wrote commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, I believe. He published editions of Srimad Bhagavatam. He published edition and commentary of Chaitanya Charitamrita. He revived some very precious scripture given by the Goswamis, like Upadeshamrita. So he was like Veda Vyasa, and he composed so much of his own original work, right? But then he finally needed someone else to give this to the world. And praying to the Lord, that response came in the form of his own son, Śrīla Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur, just as in the case of Veda Vyasa. And so Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, he had this mood of extreme harmony, right? Inclusive, very tolerant, you can say, accommodating of different religious views and conceptions and approaches towards the truth. But Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he was a revolutionary. He was uncompromising in his presentation of the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the highest, right? And that was necessary to bring about. We appreciate both perspectives, right? But for what Saraswatī Ṭhākur was able to achieve, that type of uncompromising approach, revolutionary approach, that was necessary, right? And he had a little bit of the mood of a fighter. Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he mentioned how, like years before he heard about Saraswatī Ṭhākur, met him, he heard about him, without understanding exactly who he was, through his uncle, one of his uncles. He had an uncle who was some kind of a guru. And this was before Saraswatī Ṭhākur had really started his mission in earnest, and he was staying in a small place in Mayapur, Brajapattam, it was called. And had a few people around him. But he always had this mood of boldly presenting the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even as a boy at school, right? We hear Bhakti, as a boy, he would come home, and Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur, his father, would receive reports of him squabbling with other boys over what? Over the supremacy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. He would get into fights about this at school. That's how serious he was about this. And so there was this incident years later, as a young man, but before he went out and really began his mission in Mayapur, and he was a brilliant scholar, right? He had this special title of Siddhānta Saraswatī that was given to him by one society in Calcutta, in recognition of his brilliance, right? Very brilliant. He was someone who we hear various gurus were vying to have him as their disciple, right? His father was Bhaktivinoda, that already gives him some position. And then he was very brilliant young man. And so brilliant scholar, and so he had this nature of having debate, right, in his eagerness to present the message of Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so we hear, he was becoming well known, and different scholars would come to debate with him. and he would defeat everyone because of his brilliance. We can also add, just to give some context, that India has a long tradition of theological debate. It's a tradition. It's not that he was acting, totally, out of his own, desire, but this is a tradition in India. It's an honored, long-standing tradition that pundits will debate with one another on different points, right? Just to give a little context. And so different scholars would come and meet with him, and he would defeat them. But he had this strong and very clear mood in his style. And so we hear Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj, he said that this one uncle of his, he mentioned, and perhaps Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj even just overheard the grown-ups talking, something like that. He was a young boy at the time. But he remembers clearly this uncle mentioning, oh, there's this young new scholar in Mayapur. He's defeating everyone left, right, and center in his debates. And he compared him to a bull. When a bull is like kind of pawing the ground, and it's like getting ready to enter into the fight, that he had that, like he was ready. He was always ready, right? He is in the mood of Jiva Goswami also. Every Vaishnava, every great Vaishnava has a different mood and a different role to play, right? And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he had this mood of a defender and a little bit of a fighter in presenting the glory of the teachings of his gurus and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he's in the line in this way of Jiva Goswami, right? Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj, he saw the mood of Jiva Goswami very prominently in Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur. And he actually wrote some pranam mantras glorifying him in that way, comparing him with Śrīla Jiva Goswami. And in fact, now today we're honoring the disappearance day, the day of departure of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. And it's actually, I can confirm on our calendar, but I believe it's exactly 2 weeks before the day of departure of Śrīla Jiva Goswami, because I remember Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj saying that all of the disciples, that they thought that their guru was going to leave on the day of Jiva Goswami's disappearance. Let me check this too. Yes, that's right. So the 2nd of January is the disappearance of Jiva Goswami. And I just heard that a few years ago on one tape of Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj. I was very surprised, because we haven't heard so much about that, actually. But he said this, like amongst the disciple group, they all had that in mind. Oh, he's waiting. He's going to leave on the day of Jiva Goswami. But then in the end, he chose to leave exactly like 1 fortnight before. Right? So there's this interesting relationship between Jiva Goswami and Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur, which you can also remember and honor on his day of his departure. So he had this mood of a protector, defender of the sampradaya, right, of our lineage. But one thing that's interesting, because, as I said, great Vaishnavas, they all have different moods, right, unique moods. But at the same time, their ego is detached from that. They're playing that role in a mood of service. And one nice example of that, our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, mentioned about Bhakti Saranga Goswami. He was one of the leading disciples of Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur, and he had this very bold, powerful preaching mood. Like a lion, he himself used that expression, simha, right, like lion. Very powerful, very bold, very, what can we say, so much can be said. That's enough. But he was very powerful as a preacher. And always very eager and active in his service life. He he traveled throughout India, established, new temples after the departure of his guru. We hear of this one occasion, one of his godbrothers told him, "Oh, you can calm down now. You're getting old now. You can slow down and do bhajan," right? Bhajan, service, right? But bhajan sometimes has this connotation of, quiet, meditative service, like chanting your japa and so on. But really it means service, devotion, service and devotion. So this one of his godbrothers said to Bhakti Swarupa Goswami, "Oh, now you can slow down, you're getting old, do some bhajan." And we hear that Bhakti Swarupa Goswami, he was quite irritated by that. And he didn't say anything, but he was thinking, this is my bhajan, going out and preaching and serving my guru in an active way. And then he used this expression, which he shared with Śrīla Sridhar Maharaj later, "I want to die in harness." Right? I want to die in harness. In other words, I want to die on the battlefield. I don't want to die in the retirement home, right? Or on the hospital bed, or on the couch. But I want to die in harness, right? Active. So his whole life he had this mood. Dandavat Rasananda Prabhu, tuning in from Moscow. Happy to have you with us. His whole life he had this type of strong spirit in service and preaching. And he was also the person who Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur sent to London as his representative and empowered him, the only person he empowered to do Ritvik initiation on his behalf, right? So he's this level of a preacher, very active, very bold in his preaching. However, in the very last period of his life in this world, perhaps 6 months before he left, something like that, he suddenly withdrew, right? And he stayed very quietly in his room, in this mood of meditation, chanting, and so on. Like that, like suddenly, his whole life, very, very active. Then suddenly at the end, just withdrew like that. And our Gurudev, he made this very interesting point, right? That like Bhakti Swarupa Goswami, he was showing himself as, this great, proud, powerful preacher, but he was doing that in a mood of service, right? And within, he was very deeply situated in connection with the upper region. And at any moment, he was fully capable of withdrawing. It's not that he needed to be active and he needed to be prominent, but he was doing it in a mood of service, right, for his guru. And finally, at the end, he had no problem to just detach, right, and exclusively go on with his bhajan in an internal way, right? So this is an interesting point to consider when it comes to Vaishnavas of this high level, right? It's not that they need to do their service in a particular way. They need to play this role or that role. Like in our case, we're practitioners, right? We're sadhakas. We have our material tendencies and we need to express them in service, right? We like to be active. We can be active for Krishna, right? And so on. But in the case of the great Vaishnava, it is not like that. Everything they're doing, it is in a spirit of service. And they can play this role or that role as the Lord wants them to dance, right? And so with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur, it is like that also. And it's interesting to consider this point. Like, we think of him as this very great, powerful preacher, revolutionary, visionary, and so on. But within his heart, he's just a humble servitor, right? And particularly with very deep affinity for Radharani, for Srimati Radharani. And so we hear that in his early days, right, there was this period, perhaps in his late teens or something like that. This is while Srila Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur was still present in the world. And they were living in Mayapur at that time. And we hear Saraswatī Ṭhākur was living in a local jungle, chanting hundreds and thousands of names every day, right? Nirjan bhajam, right? Solitary practice, solitary devotion, devotional service. That is how he was living, very happy like that. He didn't want to deal with the world. He wanted to deal with people's nonsense. He didn't feel the need to take up a big grand mission. But he was very happy sitting in the jungle, chanting names every day, living a life of extreme austerity. He was very happy with that. And believe it or not, in the beginning, he objected when his father, because his father understood, this is the guide. Bhaktivinoda Thakur understood, oh, he's the answer to my prayer, right? He's the one, right? He has the capacity. He can spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, right? Which he has done, right? He spread it through India and then through his disciples, right? And particularly A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, right? He spread it around the world. And so many other great, and particularly Śrīla Bhakti-Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj also, right? Giving the most profound essence of the message of Saraswatī Ṭhākur and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he himself and through his disciples, he spread this all over the world. Every town and village is chanting Hare Krishna today because of Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur. But believe it or not, in the beginning, when his father and guru, Bhakti Vinod, requested him to take this mission up, Saraswatī Ṭhākur rejected. He objected to that. He didn't have any interest in taking up this great role, right? He was very happy sitting solitarily in the forest, chanting and relishing his own internal connection with the Lord, with the name, right, with the Vaishnavas. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually had to push him a little bit, right? And he made some comment that we heard from our guru, Srila Govinda Maharaj. He made some comment, if you won't give your blood for Mahaprabhu's mission, you will become a Mayavadi. You will become an impersonalist. You had to push him like that. And we hear he also made a comment like, your mother will be very happy. Funnily enough, you wouldn't expect that also, right? But Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he had this special love for his mother, we hear, right? And so knowing that she would be pleased that he would take this mission up, then that helped to convince Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur, right? Because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as we said, right, he started this, he did the groundwork, but he needed a revolutionary to really take it off, right? To raise it up into a full-fledged mission. And so he needed Saraswatī Ṭhākur to commit to that, right? To continue with the service at Yoga Pit, the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to maintain that service and to begin taking this message out, right? And so finally, Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he agreed to that. And we also hear, he had his journey, right? Not in the ordinary sense, in the sense of Leela, right? Play, the divine play, the sweet absolute. But he had his journey in that sense, in the sense that there were moments of hopelessness that he had, right? That he felt the weight of this great mission upon his shoulders, right? This huge responsibility has been put upon his shoulders and feeling alone, right? He had his moments like that, despondency, right? And then we hear, there was some period like that when he was staying in this small place in Mayapur, Brajapata, and he had a few followers around him, and he was feeling this despondency. Oh, how am I going to be successful in taking this off? So much weight is upon me, but I am incapable. This was his feeling. And then we hear he had this vision, this extraordinary vision of the Panchatattva personally appearing before him and giving him reassurance. No, we will come to your aid, right? We will come to your aid. We will support you. And there was also one moment, there was one verse from Śrīmad Bhagavān that appeared to him in a very mystical way. I heard one version, it came floating down the Ganges River, or another version, it came like floating in the air, this like piece of paper, a strip of paper written, this verse from Nam, it's mentioning 5 principal practices of devotion. Nam Kirtam, Bhagavat Shravam, worship, it's a chanting of the name, service of the deity, residence in the Dham, Nam Kirtan, Sadhu Sangha, association with the Vaishnavas, like that. And like, this is what your mission will be. And so he had these moments of great encouragement. And finally he shifted to Calcutta, you know, because again, we mentioned earlier that comparison with Napoleon. So he thought, you know, I can't stay here in the comfort of the holy abode, the Dham of Mayapur, but I have to go to the strongholds, right? The city, the heart of the city, where illusion, Maya, is the strongest. And we hear his Diksha Guru, Gorkishore Das Babaji, very great, pure Vaishnava. He had a different mood of devotion, and he told Saraswatī Ṭhākur, don't go to Calcutta. That is the place of Kali. Don't stay in the safety of the holy Dham. Don't go to the big city. But we hear, and this also is a nice illustration of the type of bold mood that Saraswatī Ṭhākur had. Saraswatī Ṭhākur heard that, received that from his guru, but he interpreted it in a different way. That his feeling was that, oh, my guru is telling me if you really want to be successful in your mission to defeat Maya, to defeat the influence of the material energy, then you have to go to Calcutta. Then you must go there. And we hear he even made some expression, my guru ordered me to go to Calcutta. You know, that was how he received that instruction. But he started out in a very simple way. You know, there was one family, Grihasta family, they gave him a room upstairs. You know, they had their residence downstairs. They gave him a room or two upstairs for himself, and few followers were with him. That's how he started. That's how he began his mission. Small little room upstairs from someone else's house. And then, you know, gradually over time, you know, the sincere souls recognizing the authenticity and the purity of his message, they began to congregate around him. And our Param Guru, Srila Bhakti Dakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, he came, he first started visiting Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur. This would be early, this would have been 1920 something, when he first started visiting the temple, the Gaudiya Math, this mission. But Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he made one comment. He said, like, I didn't come because of some great building or organization. I didn't come because when he came, it was still relatively early in the mission, and things weren't super organized. They didn't have any, you know, great you know, mission built up, and not anything like that. It was still relatively small. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, you know, I came because of the message, the purity. Dandavad Didi, tuning in from SoCal. It's very early for you there, isn't it? Madhumito Didi. You must be getting ready to go for Mangalarati. Very nice. He mentioned it was the substance, it was the profundity of the message that I was hearing from my guru. That was what attracted my heart. It wasn't the organization, it wasn't the grand building, but it was the profundity of his message, right? And his authentic presentation. That, he said, that was what attracted me. That's what I came for, right? And so gradually, you know, Saraswatī Ṭhākur had his followers increasing, and later on his mission became, so grand. Established 64 missions throughout India and sent preachers to London, to Germany, right? And there's this, and he was attracting so much attention. He met with some very high-level dignitaries in the British government. There was that Sir John Anderson, that was quite a famous meeting. And reporters, politicians, many great dignitaries in India, they all honored him and met with him. And we hear this one, and we can also mention as a side note, last year the government of India, they, and also UNESCO, they also honored him. What was it? It was 150 years, that's right. 150 years since his birth, something like that. But anyhow, they honored him and they made a postage stamp and a coin and all of that. But he's being honored like that. But anyhow, there was this one comment that he made in it was some interview or something. And he said that I started out alone, and now I have 500 men who all say what I say. 500 men who all say what I say. That was how his mission developed. And he faced so much opposition, beginning, middle, and end. Because, as we've been saying, he was a revolutionary and he was making a lot of changes, and that was ruffling some feathers. And some persons were genuinely baffled by what is he doing? What are all these changes that he's instituting? What the heck is this? There were some who were genuinely baffled and confused and bothered by what he was doing. And then there were others who were feeling threatened, right? That, like he's coming out with the real thing and we're all going to be exposed, right? There were also some like that. And there were people who tried to kill him, right? So what was it that he did that was so radical? There were a number of things. One thing was that he introduced the sannyas ashram into the Gaudiya Vaishnava lineage, right? So the wearing of the institution of sannyas, the renounced order in Vaishnavism, this was not previously, first of all, it's not really found so much in Vaishnava lines, to some extent, and there's a precedent in the Ramanuja Sampradaya, mostly in South India. But otherwise, it's mostly in the Mayavad line, Shankaracharya line, which is in the mood of impersonalism, oneness with the absolute Advaitavad. And there's a lot of emphasis on renunciation. So there's the conception of sannyas. Actually, the meaning of sannyas, samyak nyas, means full renunciation, complete renunciation. And it's actually forbidden. That's another thing that can be puzzling. It's actually, because Kali Yuga, it's a very particular age, right? It's the most degraded age. And there are certain practices which are forbidden in this age because it's so contaminated. And one of them is sannyas, right? How do you harmonize that? That Vaishnava sannyas is different. Vaishnava sannyas emphasizes dedication, full dedication, not full renunciation. Full renunciation is not possible in this age, but full dedication. And so the Vaishnava sannyasis, at least in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, there's this Tridanda, the 3 sticks. They hold this staff and it's 3 sticks wrapped together, which represents dedication of mind, body, and words. Kai, man, bak, right? But anyhow, okay, there's some precedent for that in the Vaishnava lineage as a whole, but particularly, specifically, in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Gaudiya line, there was no precedent. And this is the thing, to really get to the key point here. one of the essential aspects of Vaishnavism is that there's this appreciation of what is the essential aspect, right? So there's less emphasis on rituals, right? There's more emphasis on the essential elements of devotional religious practice, right? So the castes, the whole caste system, bloodline, that's all rejected, right? Any conception of societal position, hierarchy, it's all rejected. It's simply the soul and the Lord, and devotion. What else do you need? You don't need any rituals. You don't need too much emphasis on rules, regulations, and so on. Formality. There's a rejection of formality or being overly focused on formality. There's a rejection of that in Vaishnavism. You don't need any special dress. You don't need any special position in the Vaishnava practice, in Vaishnava mood, Vaishnava principle. So how can you bring in this sannyas dress? This is a part of the varnashrama system, the social religious system of India. Why are we going to pollute Mahaprabhu's line with this varnashrama stuff? You know, like, what is that about? Why do you need some special dress, right? So this was one objection, right? Now, what's the answer? Why did Saraswatī Ṭhākur override all? Because actually it's completely correct. You don't need any special dress or position for devotional practice. So why did Saraswatī Ṭhākur do this? Why did he take this radical step? Because the fact is, we're living in society. We can also say, we're souls, we don't need to wear clothes, right? We can also say, we're souls, we don't need to eat food. But the fact is, right now, we have these bodies. And these bodies do need food. You know, we can say, the fact is, yeah, I'm not this body, but right now I identify with this body. I can't pretend that I don't. So therefore, it's going to make my life more peaceful if I wear clothes, for myself and for others, right? So in the same way, yeah, we don't need any special role or any special dress to practice devotional life, but because we're living in this environment, it's helpful. It gives some structure, right? It gives a standard that we can try to live up to, right? Because as we said, right, the spirit of Vaishnavism, the spirit of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's about love, right? Love and peace, right? Love and peace, baby. That's the prema dharma. But the problem is, it's very easy to take advantage of that, right? It can easily turn into a free-for-all. We can just do whatever the heck we love, whatever the heck we want, because it's all about peace and love, right? It doesn't matter. All the rules and regulations doesn't matter, right? We hear that Śrīla Sridhar Maharaj's father, he was against the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and this is one of his reasons. You know, it's just like the bums, people who don't have a job, people who don't have anything to do, they join the group of Lord Chaitanya, right? No one else will accept them. No one else will take them in, right? There was a view like that. And so because this is what had come about in society, because this type of view had developed because of persons exploiting the openness and the freeness of Mahaprabhu's movement and the emphasis on love. Because of the exploitation of that had taken place, there was a need to set a standard, to create some structure, right? And so this was why Saraswatī Ṭhākur introduced the sannyas ashram into Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lineage. Then another radical thing that Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur instituted was the giving of Brahman initiation to non-Brahmins, persons of non-Brahminical birth, right? Because what had been the practice in India was that, and we know this is actually not the idea that's given in the Vedas, but that's what had come about, that persons who were born into a Brahmin family, they were considered Brahmins. Actually, what's given in the scriptures is that persons should be identified, their caste should be identified according to their nature, right? And Krishna himself mentions this in Bhagavad Gita. Chaturvarnyam maya shishtam guna karma vibhagasaha. There's this famous verse in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna saying, I actually created this varnashrama system, which is based upon the qualities and activity. Their varna and ashram should be considered according to their nature, right? So that's the real idea behind the varnashrama system. But in practice in India, it's become very corrupt, right? And so it's just become like a bloodline thing. And so you know, there are certain conventions, right, in the Vedic world, such as deity worship will be carried out by persons with Brahminical initiation. Brahmins have particular status, right? They play particular roles, you know, as like spiritual heads of society and so on. And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he wanted to show that Vaishnavas are not less than Brahmins, right? And he wanted to honor something of the Vedic customs, you know, such as deity worship should be carried out by Brahmins. And so he gave Brahminical Gayatri initiation to persons who were not born in Brahmin families, right? And so, you know, part of this was he wanted to show the Vaishnavas are not less than the Brahmins. We can do anything that the Brahmins can do and more. And he wanted to give encouragement also to the Vaishnavas. He didn't want his followers to feel discouraged by this type of societal prejudice. Oh, we're less than these Brahmins. We can't do everything that they can do. But to encourage them also, right? Because the principle is that through the chanting of the holy name, everything can be achieved, right? And in fact, there was also some precedent in some writing of Jiva Goswami we hear, where he said that by the chanting of the holy name, Jiva Goswami had actually said that this can be done. It had never been done before in India, but Jiva Goswami did give something of a precedent in saying that this can be done. And so he said, by the chanting of the holy name, this purification takes place, and this will give one the position of a Brahmin boy, right? And then one can be given the Brahminical initiation, and they can be considered as a Brahmin. This was written somewhere by Jiva Goswami. And he also said, Jiva Goswami also said that in the future, one great Mahatma may come and carry this out. And he says it can be done. We're not doing it now simply because there's no precedent, but it can be done. In principle, it can be done. And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he picked up that thread, right? And he began that practice of giving Brahman initiation to non-Brahmas. And this also ruffled some feathers, right? This also irritated some people. And so many things, right? So Saraswatī Ṭhākur very boldly, you know, he began his mission according to the essential teachings of Vaishnavism, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had given. And gradually, as we said, you know, and the thing is, because of his authentic presentation, he was attracting authentic people. He was attracting great people. And this is one of the very prominent points about Saraswatī Ṭhākur, is that he was so glorious, right? He was so great, but he also had many disciples who were also very glorious and very great, right? And we mentioned just now Srila Bhakti Dakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj, our Param Guru, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada. They were, we consider them to be also Nitya Parshada, eternal associates of the Lord. And he had many other great disciples too. We mentioned Bhakti Sarango Goswami Maharaj, and there were so many others. They were all very powerful in different ways. And after the departure of Saraswatī Ṭhākur, we can also mention, they went on to begin many of their own missions throughout India and ultimately abroad, right? So very, very grand. The scope of his mission was very grand, and also keeping to the essence at the same time. There was this one conversation we hear that he had with this one great, like perhaps some great politician, something like that, some dignified, well-known gentleman in society. And he said to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur one time, he said, "Oh, what you're doing is so great. You know, you should have a temple in every town, in every village." And we hear that Saraswatī Ṭhākur responded to him saying, What do you say? You know, that's not the idea. He said, "But I want to establish a temple in every heart. I want to establish a temple in every heart." This was his vision. He was always preaching, always. There's a beautiful, everywhere he went, whoever he spoke to, he was always speaking the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's a beautiful verse of Srila Sridhar Maharaj glorifying Saraswatī Ṭhākur. Goda Vag Vigraham Bande, Godangam, Goda Vaibhavam, Goda Sankirtanam Matam, Goda Karunya Sundaram. It's saying that he's the Goda Vag Vigraha, that he's the Vigraha, he's the deity, he's the personification of the message of Gora, of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gorangam, he's an extension of Gauranga, he's an extension of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gora Vaibhavam, Gaurangam, the golden form like Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gora Vaibhavam, an extension of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Also the wealth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Goda Sankirtanonmatam, this is the point I was coming to. He was always intoxicated by the Sankirtan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as he pointed out himself, it was he who made this point. Speaking about the Lord, writing about the Lord, that is also kirtan. And so he was always intoxicated in kirtan in different ways, right? And actually, in fact, we hear he didn't sing in kirtan. He was expressing his kirtan in a different way. Why didn't he sing? We can understand that, you know, one of the groups that were misrepresenting, they would have this very emotional type of display of devotion, rolling on the ground, crying, and showing so much so-called ecstasy. And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he needed to establish, right, what we produce with our senses, that's not the holy name. No, that's not divine ecstasy. It's not that we'll create that higher substance by our physical expression, but rather be the other way around, by an upsurging of genuine divine feeling and connection. Then as an outward manifestation, symptoms will appear in the physical sphere. Right? And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he was always extremely sober in his conduct, and he wouldn't sing, he wouldn't dance. He was very strict in that way. But he was very eager always to speak the message, and he would share that with whomever he met. And we hear of one occasion, there was, you know, just in day-to-day matters, you know, we hear on one occasion, he was meeting with a lawyer to help him settle some legal issue. And even in that occasion, he started preaching to this poor lawyer. You know, he really was not interested, didn't want to hear. And that lawyer, at a certain point, he said, "Are you trying to convert me?" And Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur responded to him, "Yes." And he said, "But at the same time, If you will listen to me for one moment, it won't be a matter of conversion, but you will realize it is the wealth of your own heart. It is already within you. So it's not a matter of conversion. It is your own wealth. But if you will listen to me for one moment, then it would be automatic. This was his mood, this was his mood. And so today, today is his day of disappearance, his departure. And we can also mention, right, our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj mentioned, these disappearance days, they have a very unique mood associated with them. And we want to honor something of that, right? And we saw in the Mat, in our Gurudev's temple, it was a little different in the way that we would celebrate and honor that day, right? And it is very special, actually, because ultimately the mood of separation, it is the highest, right? Vipralamba, it is the highest mood. And so on this day we are honoring, we can't pretend that we have that ourselves, but we are honoring that divine feeling. And I would like to read before we close. Srila Śrīla Maharaj wrote this extraordinary, beautiful composition speaking on the disappearance, the departure of Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur. Very extraordinary. And I don't know if we'll read all, maybe I'll just read a couple verses from here, just to honor the particular mood of this day. I'll read this. And it has this refrain. It's 10 verses. At the end of every verse, there's this concluding refrain, which is very poignant. Yatra so tatra shigram kripananayanehe niyatam kinkaroyam. Which, it's a little tricky because, Srila Śrīla Maharaj, he wrote very brilliant Sanskrit, and there's different layers of meaning. But the straightforward meaning here is, wherever that great soul may be, please quickly bring the servitor there. Wherever they may be, please quickly bring me there. And that, I'll read this. There's much more profound meaning there, but I have very poor capacity. But we'll come to a little of that. So this is the first, so Shri Dayita Das Dashakam. You can find it at the end of our Prapana Jivanamrita. Maybe I'll share it on Facebook later for those who aren't familiar with it. Nite yasmin nishante nayana jala baraya snata gachar rudanam uche utkoshatam Shri Vishakapi sutaya diraya sviya goshtam prithvi Gadanda kader hitanayana mani vavrita yena hina yatraso tatra shigram kripananayana he niyatam kinkaroyam. At the end of the night of Sri Sri Rishabhanu Nandini, Ms. Radharani, she suddenly took him to her entourage, withdrawing him from the company of throngs of grief-stricken souls. A great cry of lamentation arose. Their bodies were bathed by their tears. When he was thus stolen away, this world was plunged into the deep darkness of one whose eyes have been stolen away. Hrita, stolen away. Nayana, money. This is one of the tricky points in the Sanskrit here. I mean, it's brilliant. I wish I knew Sanskrit just to be able to appreciate these compositions of Srila Śrīla Maharaj. But Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur, we hear his internal identity, right, in Goloka Vrindavan is Nayana Mani Manjari. And Nayan means eye, eyes, and Mani means jewel. So this Nayana Mani, jewel of the eye. And so one meaning here, this Nayana is referring to Saraswatī Ṭhākur. But then he's saying but then there's also this play here. He's saying my eyes, Srila Śrīla Maharaj is saying, my eyes have been deprived because I cannot have the vision of that great soul before me anymore. this kripana. Kripana is referring to like merciless, right? Or like I'm bereft, right? From that. From my eyes are bereft. My eyes have been deprived. Right? Sorrowful. Another translation is sorrowful eyes. My poor eyes. Yeah, very extraordinary. Yes, so bereft of the vision of my divine master, O my sorrowful eyes, or, O Savior of the fallen, wherever that great soul may be, please quickly take the servitor there. Then another meaning, although he is my master named Nayam, or one who brings us near, in his mercy he shows the miserliness of not taking me into his company. I'll read just the translation of the second verse. From his lotus feet, the nectarian river of divine love flows throughout the universe. His servitors, like bees, maintain their lives, drinking the honey that falls from his lotus feet. And the pure devotees in the shelter of the confidential mellows of Braja revel in the bliss and singing the glories of his lotus feet. O Dina Nayan, wherever that great soul may be, please quickly take the servitor there. And I'm going to jump ahead to the 5th verse. This is a very extraordinary expression here, where Srila Sridhar Maharaj, it's very, very wonderful. He's drawing this comparison, right? Because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he appeared in Navadvip, right? And then he departed from this world in Jagannath Puri. And then with Saraswatī Ṭhākur, it's just the inverse. Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he appeared in the soil where Mahaprabhu had left in Jagannath Puri, because Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur was born in Puri on the same street where the Jagannath Ratha takes place, right? And then he concluded his pastimes on the Navadvip side, right? Technically in Kolkata, which we can consider as an extension from Navadvip, and then his divine form was carried to Mayapur, and he was placed there in Samadhi. So it's a very beautiful, interesting interplay here, right? And I'll read this verse. Drawing up the pure golden waters of the Jambu River mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, has this golden cloud arisen on the mountain where the golden moon, Shri Gaur Chandra, descended, sat, just to shower down torrents of rain upon the whole countryside that was scorched by the forest fire of threefold sufferings, then suddenly conceal himself in the dust of the land of the advent of Sri Gauranga. O Dina Nayan, wherever that great master may be now, please quickly take the servitor to that place. And I'm just going to read one or two more. I'll go to verse 8. Do I ever have a hope? Do I have a hope to ever see that beautiful golden personality who makes everything auspicious for the world? Do I have a hope to ever behold that tall figure once again? His blue lotus eyes, his nose that excels the charm of the tila flower, his forehead that shames the half moon, his graceful lotus face, his gleaming pearl white teeth, his long arms extending to his knees. O Dina Nayan, wherever that great soul has gone, please swiftly take the servitor there. And I'll just jump to the final verse. The entire earth and skies were filled with the cries of anguish of the people and the disciples devoted to the service of Sri Gurudev's lotus feet. Where has that great master gone? Alas, today the whole universe seems empty in the separation of Prabhupada. The servitor of Gurudev cannot endure even a moment of his separation. O Dina Nayan, wherever that great soul may be, please quickly take this servitor there to him. our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, he mentioned, one of the aspects connected with these days of disappearance is that by the grace of our Guru, some touch of that feeling may come into our heart, right? Because as we mentioned, vipralamba viraha, this is the highest realization, right? Ultimately, the mood of separation, that is the highest attainment. And so there is a very special mood associated with these days of disappearance. And by honoring these days, by the grace of our Guru, some touch, some glimpse of that may come into our hearts, right? Actually, it is the wealth of our life if we can, because what is separation? Actually, the feeling of separation is an expression of extreme devotion. Right? It is like you can say in a simple way, you won't know how much you love someone until you're separated from them, right? And so one who loves the most, they feel the deepest separation in the absence of that connection, right? And so here we're hearing this very intense, very extreme expression of separation from Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and that is our great privilege. And lastly, I'll just mention, we always want to remember on this day, it is a personal connection, right? That our grandfather Guru, our Padam Guru, Srila Bhakti Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj, he was very special, in a very special way honored by Srila Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur at the time of his passing from this world, right? This was 1936 or 1937, depending whether you're calculating by Eastern or Western. It was the 31st of December 1936 or 1st of January 1937. It was in the early hours, 1st of January. And we hear 24 hours before Saraswatī Ṭhākur departed, he called for Srila Sridhar Maharaj to his bedside and particularly requested him to sing this one song, Shri Rupa Manjari Pada, which is like the great anthem of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the sacred anthem of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And insisted, in fact, that only Srila Sridhar Maharaj should sing the song on that occasion. And it was made very clear to everyone present, they all acknowledged and celebrated later, how Srila Sridhar Maharaj was given some delegation at that moment, right? Or given entrance, as some described it, to some higher service realm. The line, the Rupa Nuga Dada, right? The current of Sri Rupa Goswami that was given to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and that was recognized by everyone present. And so we feel this, particular grace, we can say, through our connection with Srila Govinda Maharaj and Srila Sridhar Maharaj, that we have this special relationship with Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur. We are trying to continue in his line. Then we may be hopeful of receiving his grace. And I can mention also our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj. He would always speak on these days, very beautifully when he would come to glorify Saraswatī Ṭhākur. And one thing he would often say, he would glorify him in a very living way, in the sense that the presence of Saraswatī Ṭhākur was alive in this world through the continuance of his legacy, right? He's alive in that, he's present in that, and by his grace it is going on. He's the inaugurator of the movement of Harinam Sankirtan in this age, and it is under his divine auspices that is continuing to go on to this day, and that his living presence is within that. And so, we feel his connection in that also, right? It is not a dead thing, right? It is a living thing. And lastly, in related to that, I can also mention Srila Śrīla Maharaj. He actually mentioned that although Srila Govinda Maharaj never directly met with Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he said it was as if he had had his close association, because he had so much of his mood. And he said, even more than many of my godbrothers. And one thing that comes to mind in this regard is this spirit of Vaikuntha Vritti. Vaikuntha Vritti means to have this very broad scope in the preaching of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, accommodation, broadness. There was this, and our Gurudev had that, right? Embracing what is the essence, what is the essential principles of Krishna consciousness, and then spreading in a very expansive, generous way, right? And so we hear this one occasion when Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he said, and this is a beautiful illustration of his mood. Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he was talking about preaching in the future in London, and he conceived of this idea, oh, we can open a student hostel, and we can host them and get some opportunity to also share the message with them in an organic way, right? And then we're going to provide accommodation. Then we can also provide food. That's normal, right? And then he took it a step further and he said, and we can even serve meat there if necessary, to keep the students happy, right, in their slow progress, to accommodate their needs. We can even serve meat. And Srila Śrīla Maharaj was present there at the time. He was absolutely shocked. And, he's coming from a Brahmin family. Srila Śrīla Maharaj, he had a particular nature, right? And he followed very strict Brahminical practices and standards of purity and so on. He was shocked, and he made an objection even. He said, oh, but Prabhupada, won't the people criticize us if we do something like that? And Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he responded, right, in a very strong manner. And he said, I considered this point 10,000 lifetimes ago. This was the mood of Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur. I considered this point 10,000 lifetimes ago. And then he said, we must be Vaikuntha Vritti. We must be Vaikuntha Vritti. We must be broad in our distribution of Krishna consciousness. And lastly, I'm reminded of another point in this regard. It was a talk that Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur gave, would have been like early 1930s or something. It was the same occasion, around the same time that Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada took initiation, in fact. But there was this Braja Mandal Parikrama that took place in Vrindavan that Saraswatī Ṭhākur was leading. And it was he at this point, his mission was very built up. He had many great leaders under him. And so he wouldn't be present in everything. The sannyasis were leading this parikrama. Saraswatī Ṭhākur came in for some period of days, and then he was going to leave. And so it was announced he was going to give his final lecture, and then he was leaving the next morning. And so it was the last opportunity that the parikramis had to hear from Prabhupada Saraswatī Ṭhākur. And so, but there were other things going on too, and so it was announced, you can either go to this lecture that's going to be delivered by Prabhupada Saraswatī Ṭhākur, or there's also going to be a pilgrimage to some special site in Vrindavan. And so we hear that the majority of the devotees present, they went, funnily enough, they went to this special pilgrimage, and it was like a dozen or so, just a few who stayed behind to hear from Saraswatī Ṭhākur. Amongst that group was Srila Bhakti-Daksha Sridhar Goswami Maharaj and Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, who at that time was a Bhai Charan. And they, at that time, they were not acquainted with each other, actually. Years later, after they'd become very close friends, they realized they'd both been there at the same time. They were both amongst this small group. And Swami, I think there's even a recording, Swami Maharaj was saying like, oh, I thought to myself, there's no use going for some eye exercise. Better to stay back and to hear from Prabhupada. And then it was shortly after that that Swami Maharaj Prabhupada received initiation. And when Saraswatī Ṭhākur was going to give him initiation, he actually commented, oh, I remember him. He likes to hear. He remembered that he'd stayed behind to hear the talk, and he appreciated that. But anyhow, in that talk, and we heard from Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj some of the contents of that talk, and here it was an extraordinary talk. And Saraswatī Ṭhākur was in the habit of giving extraordinary talks, by the way. Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj, one thing he said about him is a very funny expression. He said, one of the things that I liked about my Guru Maharaj is that he wasn't vomiting everything he'd heard, but he was always giving something fresh. Of course, we cannot say such things, but Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj can say such things. But he shared something what that talk was about. He gave a talk on Govardhan. And the literal meaning of Govardhan, or at least one of them, is Govardhan, means increasing cows. And so Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur explained this point that this is the nature, this is the style of Vrindavan, right? They're cowherds, right? And they're gopas and gopis, right? And so he said, their work is with the dairy and the cows. And so sometimes they have to breed cows, right? And so when they go to breed cows, they're not considering what's a high-class cow, what's a low-class cow. They have the bull, they have the potent bull, and they have a fertile female, the cow, and they're putting the two together and they're making more cows. Govardhan, increasing cows, right? And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he said, similarly, we want to spread Krishna consciousness in this type of spirit. We're not considering a high-class person, a low-class person, qualified person, or unqualified person, but who has a receptive heart to receive Krishna consciousness. There we are giving, right? There we are distributing. That's all. So very generous, free distribution of Krishna consciousness. No judgment. As our Gurudev liked to say, no caste, no creed, no criterion. But do you want it? Yes. And even if you don't want it, please take it. We humbly beg you. This is the mood, right? This is the mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of Nityananda Prabhu, and all of the great distributors of Krishna consciousness in the modern age. So I'll close there for today. I'm very happy that I can have this online Sangha by the grace of you all and the grace of modern technology. And we're very happy that we feel privileged that we can be connected with this divine legacy of Srila Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. And then we can see it is continuing to this day, right? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he predicted, right? Prithivityache jatanagara gram sarvatra prachar hoibe mornam, that my name will be chanted in every town and village upon the earth. And it was Srila Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur who made that possible, right? Who inaugurated that worldwide distribution of Krishna consciousness. So we're very fortunate we can be a part in some small way of that divine wave of Krishna consciousness that he inaugurated in this world. We pray that we can continue to remain in that wave, that we can be under the ray of his divine glance, as well as the divine glance of all of his great servitors. Right? Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj, Srila A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Maharaj, Prabhupada, our Gurudev, Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj, and so many great exalted Vaishnavas. So we'll conclude there. Jai Bhagavān Srila Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur ki Jai. And I mentioned one last point, Bhagavān. Sometimes you will hear, Dandavadiri Sharidiri. Happy you can join so early in the morning for you. But Bhagavān, we can also mention, you'll hear amongst the group of followers of Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj and Śrīla Govinda Maharaj, Śrī Chaitanya, associated with the Chaitanya Saraswatī Mat, sometimes this title will be used in referring to Saraswatī Ṭhākur, Bhagavān. Now, Bhagavān is normally the word for God, the Supreme Lord. But Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj actually said that we can use that in our glorification of Saraswatī Ṭhākur. He is of that caliber, right? I mention it because sometimes there's some objection from persons who don't understand, But actually, there's many scriptural precedents of great souls being honored by that title. And our Gurudev, he once gave a very beautiful explanation. Very beautiful. I was there in Navadvip, and in fact, I believe it's recorded. And our Gurudev gave a very beautiful explanation of why that term is appropriate. And he was using as like a framework the four special qualities that Krishna is said to have, right? Because it is mentioned that every soul, every jiva soul can potentially have 50 qualities, right? The devas, the demigods, they can have up to 55 qualities. Then we hear Vishnu has 60 special qualities, and then Krishna has 64. And so there are four qualities that set Krishna apart, right? His special beauty, his flute, his loving associates, and his very sweet pastimes, right? I believe that's the four. Maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong. And so our Gurudev, this one occasion, he was showing how Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he had all of these four special qualities, right? The flute, the unique vibration of his Harikatha, of his explanations of Krishna consciousness. He compared that to the flute song of Krishna. His loving associates, all of the extraordinary followers of Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur, who are all very glorious and great in their own right? His extraordinary pastimes, right, in his distribution of Krishna consciousness, and his beauty and his charm also. And our Gurudev gave a very nice explanation. So Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj, I don't believe he practiced it himself, but there's actually a place where he wrote it down, that this Bhagavān Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur, this is appropriate. He can be honored with this title. And our Gurudev, he would use that title often in glorifying Saraswatī Ṭhākur. So we can say, Bhagavān Śrīla Bhakti Siddhānta Saraswatī Ṭhākur ki jai, jai Śrīla Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki jai, Śrīla Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki jai, Śrīla A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai, all the assembled devotees, sincere seekers ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Tito Bhav Maha Mahotsava ki jai, Jai Gaur Premanand Day. Wishing you all a beautiful day of meditative observance. Jai Shri Gurudev, and may all of your blessings be upon myself. Hari Bol.